Unfiltered opinions.
Sometimes you have ideas and you're not quite sure why.
As you secure the bag.
Sometimes you meet people and realize there's probably a reason why you stayed in touch.
Just listen.
Sometimes all the pieces just come together by themselves.
I'm Jimmy Moyaha.
And I'm Simon Brown.
Welcome to Insider Exchange.
This week we are diving into the world of critical minerals. Remember, folks, if you've missed our market matters and our thoughts around what's happening in the US, you can go catch up on that. It is under the live stream tab on our YouTube. And if you are listening to the podcast, it will be the section just before this one. As I said, we're diving into critical minerals. We're looking at rare earth and new age critical minerals and how they are shaping the conversations around the world. So, They are, right? And last week, I was in Cape Town for the Finance in Commons Summit alongside the G20 conversations that were happening. And the conversation of critical minerals comes up. And it's how do we grow or industrialize emerging markets and developing economies through the use of critical minerals, but using critical minerals in energy transition, so greener minerals, your nickel, your cobalts, your coppers, all of those sorts of things. And initially, when this conversation came up, probably during the pandemic or many years ago, and people were saying the just energy transition and we're moving away from fossil fuels, and I was a bit on the fence about that, I'll be honest. I was on the fence because I sat there saying we allowed certain economies to industrialize through the use of fossil fuels. Now, suddenly, it's a problem for other economies to use fossil fuels to industrialize.
I agree with you on that. I mean, 100%, and that is, I mean, a stark reality, right? So, I mean, you know, what's the thing is the stat, if Chinese used the amount of oil per capita that America does, we would be an oven. I mean, but, you know, so it's like, ooh, don't do what we did.
That's it, right? But we were allowed to do it, and we were allowed to make money from it, and we were allowed to grow our economies and build our economies and our industries. And now the same United States that's supposed to then come back and account for or do their part to undo climate change is the first to pull out of the Paris Accords.
Twice. Yeah. Well, look, that goes back to the orange one. But no, I mean, that is the stark reality. And truthfully, I mean, China's managed it, right? China's got to become the second biggest economy in the world without that level of per capita. Now, partly because they've got such a giant population. So you've got probably hundreds of millions of people living in poor rural areas who don't consume any sort of anything. You know, they, I suppose, burning wood and old school type stuff.
Old school way, yeah.
But I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it is a complete disconnect, but it is going to move forward. It is going to happen. It's everything from, I mean, the demand for electricity, in part because electrical infrastructure the world over is so very old. Eskom is just one of many aging ones. To the new demand coming through from data centers, etc., the transition to green renewable energies. But when you think what they are, so it's copper, right? And that's Billiton wanting Anglo for their copper. It's lithium, all the talk, Sibanye, their Finnish operations or plans, etc., around lithium, nickel, cobalt, rare earths. I mean, so Trump wants Ukraine's rare earth minerals. Now, Ukraine doesn't have very much rare earths. China has like 80 or 90% of the world's supply, and Ukraine has a tiny bit. But these are, and rare earths are mostly around cell phones and stuff. But these are the minerals of the future. The problem is that, let's take copper. For 15 years, I've been hearing about the coming supply cliff in copper. And it never seems to happen, man. There's just always more coming through. And maybe partly it's recycling when prices get to a certain point.
Yeah.
It becomes viable to recycle the commodities.
But also, copper is one of those metals, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is about 90% recyclable. Yeah. So you don't really need to be mining all of it constantly. You just recycle what's out there already. But to your point around the critical minerals conversation or the rare earth metals conversations, you're seeing that different countries and different regions are now using this as, I don't want to say people are weaponizing it, but there's a clear jostling that's taking place for these rare earth metals and critical minerals. And if you look at the trade war side of it, we call it a trade war because that's what it is. Tariffs are a trade war. President Trump said there will be another set of 10% tariffs imposed on China effective tomorrow. But the previous round of these tariffs and things, the United States had imposed something on China, and China's response was, well, we're not going to supply you with these rare earth metals anymore. And that was quite a shock because I suppose you always assumed you'd be able to get that. But from a supplier point of view and a producer point of view, I think about regions like Africa and South Africa. The conversations are different now. Now the conversations, as people are jostling for these critical minerals and trying to get them out of the earth and trying to get them into their economies, now the conversations are switching to, hang on, if you're going to take the minerals from here, we want beneficiation, which was never a conversation that happened in the past. In the past, it was always extract, send off, do whatever. Now it's, hang on, we're not going to let you just do that because you're saying we must industrialize with these critical minerals, and therefore we want to industrialize. And now it's an awkward conversation because the powers that have historically have always been used to just take, now find themselves having to negotiate and say, oh, no, but let's see if we can come to a compromise and this and that.
And it does get, and it's also, I mean, I take your point. I mean, it was, right? In the old days, it was just take. It's China banning a whole bunch of their rare earths back in December exports, and then again another bunch through, I think, in early Feb at the same time. It has, in many senses, if you want to become, and let's say it's largely on the transition to a greener power grid and the expansion of the power grid. That's an economic, what's what I'm looking for. It's an economic advantage if you can do it, and your competitor down the road, i.e. America or Europe, can't do it. Well, that puts you in a better position.
It does. So, and if you think about the geopolitical standpoint from that point, right, we have this very clear conversation, this very clear narrative that Donald Trump believes no one should be ahead of America, no one should be greater than America. Then you have the critical minerals conversation, and you're like, but America doesn't have critical minerals.
No, they don't.
To speak of.
And
I say that softly because I don't want the Orange Mussolini to wage a war against South Africa. We don't need a war at the moment. We're perfectly happy with our copper reserves and with our lithium reserves and our helium reserves. Please leave us alone. We don't have anything. We lied. Sorry. There's no reserves here. We have nothing. There's no reason to wage war against us.
But it becomes strategic. And I imagine, to the earlier conversation we had in the earlier segment, when America confiscated citizens' gold, it becomes strategic. And many of them are. Now, at this point, rare earths are a weird one, but, cobalt, nickel, copper, there's a lot of it going around. Now, the Billetins and the Anglos of the world want to try and control those, but there's, at this point, sufficient. But, I mean, I don't know, roll forward, 50 to 100 years. You won't remember the commodity super cycle in the early 2000s that was supposed to last forever and, of course, died a sad death along with everything else in 08, 09. And then, I mean, it was all, copper's the future, etc. And here we are, copper, guys.
I think it's a weird one as well now, because you're finding now sort of sitting in a space where it doesn't really matter which commodity you're looking at or which critical mineral you're looking at. The common thread is the same, is that they are found in the same sorts of regions. So let's say we continue on the path that we'd been continuing on. Let's say we don't go EVs and green vehicles and all of that, and we stick with internal combustion engines. Platinum stocks, PGM counters are going to absolutely love that. Let's say we do transition and we go after lithium and EVs and all of that. South Africa and African countries that produce cobalt and nickel and all that are going to love that. South America is going to love that as well. So either way, it doesn't really matter which way it swings. The only way that mining companies don't make money in the future is if everybody decided to walk, or we go back to a horse and carriage. And even then, horses...
because you needed nuts and bolts and iron and that sort of stuff.
Kumba's going to be happy. So somewhere along the line, someone wins. And I think the common thread around the critical minerals conversation is that someone winning is not who we historically have known it to be.
Yes, and that's back to there is a geopolitical shift happening in the world right now, and weirdly, critical minerals are part of that shift. So is the winner going to be America in this case? Well, no, because they don't have anything. It's going to be China, who has a lot and has a lot of influence, and that influence is only going to be expanding. I mean, I can't believe that China hasn't phoned up Zelensky and said, "Yeah, man, let's have a little chat now."
So I think that's just purely out of respect to Russia at this point,
Probably.
or saying we're dealing with bigger things at the moment. So Russia's got that under control. We're dealing with America, which is slightly bigger than Ukraine to deal with at the moment. So it's prioritizing what is important at which point. But to your point, Sai, around China's positioning here, China's taken the stance of making friends with those that have the resource, whereas
Belt and Way Initiative.
Whereas the other side of the world has taken the stance of saying we will impose tariffs, we will impose sanctions, we will offer people refugee status, we will go the complete opposite carrot stick kind of conversation. And I think the world is very much at the point where we're like, we're not going to be threatened and abused and spoken to in that manner just purely because of who you think you are.
Yeah, I think so. And there are proxy fights happening everywhere, and it is critical minerals, rare earths is part of those proxy fights. I mean, the other is the central bankers buying gold. Now, that was the sort of weaponization. Truthfully, it started pre-pandemic, but the weaponization of the dollar when Russia invaded Ukraine and lost access to their dollar reserves, which are sitting in Austria, all of those sort of complexities. So we've seen that happening. And of course, the flip side, if central banks the world over are buying more gold, they're buying less US Treasury bills, most notably, of course, China.
There we go. Yeah. And even in buying that, they still hold significant number of treasury bills that need to be settled at some point or paid off for whatever it is that we need to deal with there. But on the conversation of critical minerals, it's very clear that this conversation is now going to probably take shape and probably become a focal point for the next 20, maybe even 30 years, where countries are repositioning themselves, alliances are being formed over the use of critical minerals and rare earth metals or whatever it is that we're calling them. But it's a clear shift that, one, I didn't think would happen in this lifetime, but two, doesn't really have a direction as to where it's going to end up. It's still anybody's game, I suppose. Anyone,
because he has a crazy theory, which everyone's going to laugh at. Laugh yourselves away, but he has a scenario. So two things. What about if, I don't know, Europe went to Anglo and said a streaming deal, we'll take all your copper at 30% above spot. But has an even further one. What if China says to Anglo, we're going to delist you at $1,000? And China's done it before. They bought one of our miners. Was it a small little copper miner, Metarex, one of our little miners about 20 odd years ago, where China says, look, we need to secure our copper. There's a copper miner. Oh, they're listed. Nice. Buy them. Not listed.
No longer listed anymore.
Not listed. Make a deal. In other words, we almost get secondary markets. You can go buy your copper on the open market, but there's a whole lot of other copper that has just been sent straight to a economy, a whatever the case may be.
Interestingly enough, there are 26 minerals mined in South Africa, right? So we've got coal, PGM, gold, diamonds, iron ore, manganese, chrome, uranium, copper, nickel, vanadium. Now we're getting into the weird ones. Rare earth minerals and metals, lithium, zinc, tin, magnesium. Okay, those are, we've got emeralds, we've got lead, there's phosphate, but there's the weird ones. They're all on the list. There's 26 of them, and it just shows you that very clearly we're not the only ones, right? So, by the way, we are not the only country on the continent that has these minerals. In fact, there are other countries that have mineral deposits that exceed ours. I think if I remember correctly, South Africa led the charge or led the numbers in terms of world's rhodium deposits.
Yeah. So we have, I mean, if this was a risk game and commodities counted, we'll be winning with all of those commodities. Why are we sitting here at the southern tip of Africa, like bumbling along? Okay,
like the unloved middle child or something.
Yeah. We should be.
Middle children, you are loved out there.
Jimmy loves you. But we should be winning this game because we have, I mean, not all in big quantities, but we have them all. And there's probably someone out there who's like, oh, we don't have something from the periodic table, but we have them.
But if we go back to the olden days and we go back to the barter system, we can quite easily take what we have and barter our way into something that we don't have, right? Especially if beneficiation is a conversation and we're going to use those minerals and metals here. I suppose the big winner in all of this seems to potentially be China with all of the friends that they're making at this point. But we will have to leave the deep dive on that note. Critical minerals, rare earth metals, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your take around that. Is that the future of where mining is going? Is that the future of where trade and global interaction is going? And if that is the case, which country comes out on top? That's the deep dive. And we wrap things up with a look at investor insights. We are taking a look at what you should be investing in if you are someone that has a bit of disposable income or that is looking at interesting things and looking for nice things, right? So everybody deserves nice things in life. We're going to be taking a look at whether or not some nice things make sense. And this is sparked by a very interesting conversation. Someone crashed a McLaren. I think it was a 720S, if I'm not mistaken. It was a $3 million.
Was it papaya color?
It was a white McLaren when it left the showroom floor. It had lost a bit of its color by the end. And you said something very interesting to me, Sai, around...
Most supercars are crashed in the first 100 Ks of their existence.
That's crazy.
Well, because you got your supercar, you get in, at some point you put your foot flat. Now, when I got my Roadster Coupe and I put my foot flat, I went from, 100 to 140. Yeah, no one noticed. You do that in a supercar, you go from 100 to 240 and you haven't blinked yet. Partly because your eyeballs are being pulled back into your head. And you just don't understand the level of power.
And should you then be doing that from an investment point of view, right? Now, I know we don't want to get into the boring side of it around the investments and all of that, but if I'm going to spend 3, 4, 5, 6, even 10 million rand on a vehicle only to crash it after 100 Ks, surely that's not money well spent?
No. Look, I mean, they do. I mean, and I can only really speak to Ferrari because, of course, they're Ferrari. I mean, Ferraris and Porsches to a good degree as well, and they hold value. They absolutely hold value.
Yes.
But then every time you drive it, you're decreasing some of that holding value because you're putting mileage, you're going to scratch it, you're going to crash it on top of...
Someone's going to crash into you.
Yeah, etc., etc. Your insurance is going to cost a fortune. My brother-in-law at one point had a collection of about 20 or 30 supercars. And he's now been selling them because they sold, well, in fact, he sold them, I think all of them. They sold their chateaus, so he didn't have space to store them anymore. And he did all right on them, but he didn't really beat the market much.
Interesting.
Because you got to service them once a year, and now you've got to get someone who can service them, and that person comes out. And also, he was living in rural France, so someone had to come down from Paris and stuff like that. So he says all in, and so he was able to store them at no real cost. He had this giant space at the place undercover, so he could store them. So he didn't have that cost, but overall, it made money, but no one got rich.
Interestingly enough, I remember there is a report that's put together by New World Wealth. It's a report around classic cars, and it suggests that you can actually get a better return on investment from classic cars than you can from certain markets, right? And in particular, they used a bunch of random examples. It's a really good report. I actually love the gentleman who puts it together and sends it through every now and then, Andrew Amoyles. Very, very good report there. But it does suggest that you can actually use this as an investment kind of conversation. But again, that now comes down to where do you draw the line between investment and enjoyment? So, as you said, the more you drive the vehicle, the more you're exposed to these sorts of things, whether it's depreciation or mileage or anything of the sort. The mere fact that it's moving around, you run the risk of someone hitting the car.
My brother-in-law had an E-Type Jag, the most beautiful car ever made. I know. How old's that car? 60, 70 years old? Done 10,000 miles.
There we go.
No one's ever driven it. And I mean, I suppose it depends. If you either buy a car for the thrill of driving it and then hope you don't crash it. And it's weird. My Roadster Coupe, when I insure it, like I said to them, should I put a tracker in? They're like, nah. 'Cause no one steals them. You crash them.
There we go.
So either you're buying it for the purpose of this is fun, or you're buying it for the purpose of this is an investment. And if those two overlap too much, then, well, the fun becomes less fun because you're worried about your investment, and your investment becomes less investment
Because you're worried about the fun.
because
Yeah.
you're having fun. So I suppose it depends why you're buying.
Depends on why you're buying it. That's quite an interesting take, especially around the vehicle conversation, because as you said, some of them do hold value, some of them don't, and some of them don't even make it around the corner. Imagine that. Imagine having a full tank. You've just taken ownership of the vehicle. It's driven less than 100K, as Sai says, and now insurance has written it off.
Yeah.
That hurts just thinking about it. We're going to move on to our wall because this is just too much to deal with. But we might do that. We might do a separate deep dive into the classic car world, into the car world, and see what makes for an investment case. If you have any thoughts around that, please let us know. I know a couple of people out there that are collectors, that enjoy collecting classic vehicles, that enjoy looking at classic vehicles. In fact, some people enjoy putting them together. If I remember correctly, Wayne McCurry has a garage full of vehicles that he's been building, and we should have him.
Jaguars.
There we go. We should have him on the show to tell us about all of that and what started that.
But probably I speak under correction, but as I understand, he's doing it because he's fun.
But fun could intersect with investment from his perspective,
case, so
right?
he's rebuilding and stuff. Yeah. So there's 100%. So there's a hobby. I suppose it's a side hustle, right? I think his problem is he's not very good at selling.
It's the selling part that matters.
The kids move out. You're just like, oh, bedroom
Oh,
space.
more space for another car. But yeah, would love to hear your thoughts, community. Please let us know what you think around the vehicle space, especially the hypercar, supercar, luxury car space, whether or not there's value there. Do you think it's worthwhile? I mean, there was a time where Ferrari had you buying a certain Ferrari or certain Ferraris in order to qualify for another Ferrari.
Yeah.
And funny enough, around that, before we go on to the stocks, those that purchased the Ferraris have since complained, saying that I've had to buy 3 Ferraris to get access to a LaFerrari or the replacement of a LaFerrari, and the 3 Ferraris that I've had to buy have depreciated in value to the extent that it now doesn't make sense for me to want to buy that exclusive model anymore, because the ones you're forcing me to buy are all just depreciating in value.
Yeah, but you're buying Ferraris for the wrong reason.
Fair enough.
You buy them to go fast. You do not buy a Ferrari to win the Formula One championship, because
Lewis Hamilton might disagree with that.
he was hoping, but Lewis, man, sorry for you. Come on, those oaks could be the only 2 cars in the race and they would still come third. Somehow they would manage to come third. Do they appreciate you buy a Ferrari because it's bright red, it's a Ferrari, it goes fast and people go, woo. I mean, if a McLaren came past me on the road, I would notice a supercar. I wouldn't know what it was.
Yes.
A Lamborghini, if it's Lamborghini orange, I would. Otherwise, I don't. Ferrari, man, I know what that is every time.
It's red. You're going to see it.
Yeah,
it's red.
It's a Ferrari. Imagine buying a Ferrari and making it white.
I've seen a white one.
Hey,
I saw a white one
is
this
that
weekend. I
allowed?
saw a white one. I saw a grey one. So, yes, in the modern day, you are allowed to buy Ferraris in other colors. But I am reminded, and I suppose this is where we'll leave it on that note. I'm reminded of the immortal words of one Henry Ford. Any color you like, as long as it's black. In this case, in Ferrari's case, it would be as long as it's red.
It doesn't have to be red.
It doesn't have to be
Sorry,
red.
I could have that.
You're Googling colors of Ferraris.
That is hurting
You can
me.
have a yellow one if you want.
Oh.
It can almost look like a Lamborghini.
Ooh, yo. Okay.
There you have it, Ferrari. Simon is disappointed that you are no longer the purist that you used to be. And we're going to leave that on that note because we need to update our wall. We've been taking a look at a couple of things on the wall.
Yeah.
We've been saying that we're not going to rush into updating this because it's still early in the year. There's still a lot that is out there, but I think it is time to move a couple of things around. We are starting with local picks. We had previously said to avoid someone like Blue Label Telecoms. We didn't like them at one point, and then we had Moshima on the show, and she wouldn't stop raving about them. And since then, they've been running quite hot. They've made a couple of announcements around Cell C, around their business, around where they're going. Do we like them enough to remove them from the avoid?
I think so. Firstly, because, Mishima's right about more things than I ever am, so let's not argue with her. But also, they've kind of got finally, look, the Cell C purchase was an unmitigating disaster. They should never have done it, but they did.
And they're still doubling down on it.
They're still doubling down, but that kind of seems to be getting to a point of working. The problem is our market's not big enough for 4 telcos. Hell, America's not big enough for 4 telcos. We should have 3, and there needs to be some merging happening, probably Cell C and Telkom, but neither side wants to.
Well, one's not going to relinquish their state capacity, and the other one's not going to allow themselves to become state-owned, I suppose.
Yes. So, not going to happen. But that seems to be at least no longer bleeding. And then they're just going back to what they did in the good old days, which they sold licenses, like Microsoft licenses, and airtime, and power, and all of those sort of things. And that's a nice, simple margin business.
That's it. Good margins,
And
less headache.
The chart looks pretty, which is why Mishima likes it. Yeah. In fact, I was going to say it's at all-time highs, but as soon as I zoom that chart out, it is not at all-time
No, not just yet.
all-time highs are 22 Rand. It's at 757 on Friday. But, I mean, it's looking really good in the chart. I mean, probably should have bought it back when Mishima was saying, when was that? Early Jan, I was sick? No, early Feb.
Early
whenever it
Feb,
was.
yeah.
But it is looking good on the chart. And I think the Cell C being less painful for them is good for the overall business.
So hurting a bit less, finally starting to turn the corner on that business. You've dug yourself so deep that you can only really go up from there. Okay, we'll move Blue Label Telecoms. One of the other ones that I suppose we need to move, we had moved it out, we'd moved it back, we'd moved it out. I think at this point we must just leave it off the wall. Sasol.
Do what? So Coronation, top 20, looked at Sasol, said, Aish, sold it all.
That's quite a conversation because Sasol's also, I mean, it's held quite a bit here at its 80-ish Rand support level. Surprisingly, it has held quite well there. It's been there for quite some time. So you can almost say you're getting in relatively low if you hadn't previously been in Sasol.
Sure.
Now,
sure.
those that have been holding the pain from 130 Rand or even higher than that, or you know, we're sorry. I mean, we didn't know this was going to happen either, but we're sorry on your behalf. We feel your pain. But at 80 Rand, I suppose there is still an argument that can be made that your downside risk isn't what it was.
Well, no,
but
it's 100%.
Your upside, right?
Your downside is still 100%.
Always still 100%, but your upside.
But I take your point.
And on the upside of it as well, it's not to say that it's going to move now. It's not to say that if you get in now, it's going to start moving because this is how you feel about it, you know? So,
but there's an interesting point. So for example, it was Coronation and Stanlib sold between them 9 billion of Sasol shares in Q4 of last year. And that does explain a lot of the selling pressure, because the whole time everyone was like, well, who's selling? Well, someone out there was selling.
Someone was selling, yeah.
You can love it as much as you want.
Now we know who.
Now we know who. There is a bit of a consolidation sort of happening in the 80s with the occasional pop-up to 100, which gets everyone very excited. They've got, and I take your point, I mean, the downside here is 100%, make no mistake. But I think at 80 Rand, when it made, what did it make? 14 Rand in HEPS in H1, in a horrible H1. It's going to make 28 bucks. It's in a PE of less than 3, a dividend yield of 0, a lot of debt, a lot of challenges. But if they can just come with one big game changer, and there's only really one out there for them, and it's Lake Charles. But do you want to be selling those assets at the bottom of the worst cycle that we've seen in chemical prices in 20 years? The answer is no, but Sasol hasn't got a heck lot of choice in that. If someone came and offered them a pile of money, they'd have to take it, of course. Then all that's left with Sasol is a lot less debt, but they, secunda, pollution, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, but they've worked that out. They've worked out how to remeasure their
because they
emissions and things. And
yeah, so they are measuring on average, not peak. They got the government to change their mind, which is kind of the fox looking after the chickens. But hey, if you are a fox, you want to look after chickens. If you are Sasol and a Sasol shareholder, you absolutely want Sasol to be counting the pollutants, not government, because, well, hey. So I think you're probably right. I think the risk here is probably a lot lower.
It's all baked in, a lot of it.
Sure. I mean, what can happen to Sasol that we don't know? Oil 50? Nah, not going to happen.
We've gone through that.
Rand 12?
No.
Nah.
And if that were to happen, the rest of the economy would be doing enough for Sasol that supplies 30% of our power things to still be making money
exactly.
anyway.
So perhaps you're right in the sense that the news with Sasol is all bad. But
And they're holding on.
What's the new bad news? I can't think of it.
That's it.
So then it's like, okay, what could be some good news? Well, chemical prices start to recover, oil goes to 90. So maybe it has become sort of more asymmetrical at this point in time.
Yeah.
I'm still not. I'm waiting for a little bit of a reversal pattern on the chart, and to me, that is a weekly close, probably above 102.
Yeah, and then even after the weekly close above 102, I'd still want to see it hold above 100 first, because it's very easy to tap the 100 Rand level. We saw it do that.
Yeah.
I'd still wanted to firmly reestablish that we are now sitting at 100 comfortably and we can move from there. So it's definitely going to be a very long time before we see anything near 150, 200, even 600 where it used to be. But I'm starting to see that this consolidation happening at the bottom potentially suggests that we're not going to push down to 20 Rand a share, right? Yeah. That seems also a bit unrealistic.
The low price target is 106.
There we go.
The high is 210. Now, I'm not getting this is a US provider of data, so they only have 9 recommendations, 3 holds, 4 buys, and 2 strong buys. And I know that there are higher price targets out there. Yeah, I just don't know who. So, because Standard Bank used to have a 551, but they have withdrawn that.
Well, we'll see.
Or updated it or whatever.
We'll see. We kind of partially, sort of, almost like Sasol again. We're trying to see where we end up on that. So that's a couple of the local ones that we're adjusting. From an international perspective, we are not really going to move much because I think Palantir, where it is in a void alongside Nokia, kind of still makes a lot of sense there. We still have Sprouts as an alternative we're still searching for. We might move it out of there if we don't find an alternative, because we did really like it. It was just it had run so hot. And Hermes, BlackRock, Pfizer, Tesla, all of them still looking for far better alternatives there. And I think we've moved BlackRock, actually. We've moved BlackRock out of there, so we need to update that on our wall. We have added Asian stocks. We've got Tencent. We've got JD.com.
Yes.
We've got BYD, Build Your Dreams, which I saw one, by the way, this weekend.
Did you?
Yeah, they look like a normal SUV, but I don't know. I think we're just seeing a growing popularity in people actually just buying.
There is a bit of the Chinese one. So I saw a GWM, which stands for Great Wall Motors. I saw a surprising number of those this weekend. And it starts to, all the Chinese cars are kind of all looking the same. A Chery or a GWM or a Jet.
A JQ, all of those.
Is that how you say it?
Well, that's how they said it at the dealership when I was there at some point. JQ.
So that T is...
No, wait, which one are you talking about?
The JETOUR.
No, that's the Jetor. That's a different one. That's a different Chinese brand.
The Chinese company is a French name.
I don't know. The JQ one is the JAEC00 one.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to add Chinese vehicle manufacturers to our wall next time. We don't know yet. We will find out when we do. There's so many of them. Send us your recommendations. If you have ones that you like, if you have ones that you've driven and you think would be a good value for money, let us know, because maybe we'll get them in colors that are not red. We're going to see how that works out, because apparently red Ferraris are not a thing anymore. And we're all disappointed by it. We've vented this and we will keep venting this until someone listens. We're going to leave the show there. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. If you have missed the conversations, you know exactly where to catch up on those conversations. And in keeping with what we have been doing, this week's Unfiltered Opinion is: our government is like Avant, promising to leave their wife for us, and it never happens. Anyone that's listened to lie about us knows exactly what I'm talking about. Till next time, investing isn't hard. Just try it.